And once this is recorded, we are going to post this onto our YouTube page. During this, if you have any questions that we don't answer, feel free to chime in the comment section and ask. We will try to answer some questions at the end. If we don't get to your question, we will go back through afterwards and answer any questions that do come up. So we do encourage you guys to ask, and we'll try to help out as much as possible. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to Ashley and have Ashley talk to you guys about how to prep your site for a native pollinator plot. So Ashley, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, so I'm Ashley Dawson. Like she said, I'm a farm bill biologist with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever in East Central Illinois. And as part of our new Habitat Lunch Break series, I'm going to talk with you today about preparing a grass field for native habitat establishment. So our native habitats look beautiful, and nature makes it seem like they come into existence almost effortlessly. But in reality, restoring native habitat takes time and requires multiple steps. So today I'm going to walk you through a brief overview of how to do that. So if you're watching this, you probably already know you have an old hay field or just a grass field that's been let go, and that's the site you want to plant. But it's still good to pay attention to site selection. You still want to make sure you're planting in full sun. Our native wildflowers really require that full sun. They're prairie species. There are some seed mixes out there that have more shade tolerant species, but for the most part, if you're planting native habitat, you want to be in full sunlight. Level ground, we really prefer level ground because establishment methods are going to most likely leave bare soil behind. And so we want to prevent erosion as much as possible. If you have, for instance, clay or sandy soil, you're going to need a different seed mix. There are plenty of seed mix options out there, especially if you're clay soils. I know, for instance, that coneflower is one of the species that does really well in clay soils. If your soil tends to be wet periodically, for instance, if you're in an area along a waterway, then a tall grass mix may be a better option for you versus a short grass mix, which is more for upland areas that are almost always dry. And if you have aggressive weeds that are adjacent to the ground you're going to be planting, or even starting to grow into that ground, you need to pay special attention to that. For instance, if you have something like Phragmites that's growing next to the area that you're going to be clearing to plant, that could become a serious issue, because while you're trying to establish these native wildflowers and grasses, those invasive weeds are going to be trying to establish themselves. So that's something that you would really want to deal with before you started on the establishment. The most important thing to remember about site preparation is that no one method works for everyone. A combination of methods seem to work best. And it's also important to remember that an old hay field or just a grass field that's been let go is going to require more work and effort to prepare than, say, a crop field, just because you've got all of this grass and weeds that's already grown up in there that you're going to have to get rid of. The method of planting that you're going to use is going to determine what kind of site preparation you do. For example, for really small plantings, you can do plugs, which are actually like live plants. But mostly we recommend for people to use the broadcast seeding. That's really your best option. But broadcast seeding is going to require bare soil to be present. So you're going to have to clear off all of that vegetation that was previously there. You can also use a no-till drill to very shallowly place seed. But again, the broadcast seeder is normally your best option. And whatever method you use for establishment, your first goal is going to have to be to remove that competing vegetation. Basically, you've got all of these cool season grasses growing out in this field. A lot of times it's fescue and any kind of other weeds. Some of them may be native, but a lot of them are non-native species. And those are already established out there. And if you try to plant in the middle of all that, what they're going to do is they're just basically going to outcompete your native species that you're trying to get to grow. So basically you just have to have all that stuff be dead. It needs to be dead before you plant. The most traditional way of doing that, of killing off this cool season grasses, is glyphosate, which is Roundup. Normally it's like a 5% glyphosate mix, and you're going to have to spray that multiple times because these, like fescue is really tough to kill, and you are going to have to spray it normally at least 3 times. We normally recommend like a spring, a summer, and a fall spray. Tillage is another site preparation option. You can use this a lot of times after you've used the herbicide in order to get that bare ground established for the broadcast seeding. Tillage basically is going to expose bare soil. You really want to only lightly work the top 1 inch of soil, because any soil disturbance that you do is going to cause more seed that's down there in the seed bank of the soil to germinate. And that's mostly just going to be, hundreds of years worth of fescue seed and weed seed down there. Your cultivation is going to need to persist over the entire growing season. So you're going to have to, if you start tilling, you're going to have to till multiple times. We also recommend that people spray after working the ground, just like I said, to kill anything that might be stirred up. Prescribed fire is another site preparation option. That's a really good one for removing grass residue. Again, if you're going to broadcast seed, you need that bare soil. It does encourage new growth, and usually by itself, it's not going to eliminate all of these competing species. So if you just go out there and burn, that's not going to kill your fescue. In fact, if you do it at a certain time of year, you're actually going to just encourage the fescue. So it's really something that you do along with other methods of establishment. Mowing is also an option. It may be necessary, especially if you're starting with a field that hasn't been maintained in a long time. You're going to have really tall grass, and you might have to go out there and mow that even before you do the herbicide application, just to reduce that grass height to a more manageable level. Again, it encourages new growth, and it does create more thatch. So if you go out there and mow, then you can also burn afterwards to remove that thatch from and expose that bare soil. And so, like Katie said, some people are really just interested in doing like a little backyard planting of wildflowers. And so for that kind of site preparation, you do have more options, just because you can use more labor intensive methods because you're not covering multiple acres. Sod removal is a relatively easy method, especially if you have lawn grasses. You can just kind of like pull up the sod and expose the bare soil underneath. If you're doing a little bit of a larger area, or you're not physically capable of doing that by hand, there are sod cutters you can rent from a lot of hardware stores. Another site preparation method that people use for smaller sites is solarization. That's basically where you cover the ground with these plastic sheetings, and all the vegetation has to be covered, and the plastic has to be left. Normally it's over the whole of the summer. So the hottest months of the year is when you want to do this. And the goal of that is basically it's going to raise the soil temperature enough to kill off all of that weed seed. And of course, in today's age, a lot of people are interested in organic agriculture. And so I've also had people ask me questions about organic site preparation, where they don't want to use the glyphosate. And you can prepare a site organically for habitat establishment. It's just going to take more time and effort on your part. Cover cropping is an option that's worked for some people, along with tillage to suppress competing vegetation. So like basically in the fall, like right now, you would go out and you would till up all that grass, and you would till up, you're aiming to rip up all those roots and expose them basically to the frost and the wintertime temperatures to kill off that grass. And in order to, keep your soil erosion to a minimum, you could plant a cover crop like oats. And then in the spring, again, you would do the same thing. You would rip it up again and probably plant another cover crop like buckwheat. And really, this is something that you might have to do. You would almost certainly have to do it at least for a year, possibly for more than that, in order to get that prepared and to kill off all of the fescue and that kind of thing. Even then, you would maybe have to use periodic perimeter tillage to keep fescue from growing into your field, which that can damage some of your native plants that require multiple years to grow undisturbed. Repeated tilling just by itself without the cover cropping is also an option that I have seen work for people. It does require more time to exhaust the weed seed bank. You're basically just going to have to go out there every month, every couple months for at least a year and till. And so, you're spending more time and effort on it. At the same time, you're doing organic establishment. An alternative approach, if you want to maintain this, manage it organically, but you're willing to use herbicide in the beginning, is transitional organic methods. So you use that herbicide for that initial weed control to kill off your fescue or other cool season grasses. And then you only use organic techniques for management from then on. So the best time to actually plant your seed is November through late February. You can technically plant March through early June, but we tell people November through late February is really the best time. The freeze-thaw action that's going on during that time period really encourages the germination, because these are wild species that have evolved into this native habitat. And so they really do best when they're just exposed to that habitat throughout the winter time. It really does help them to be successful. And it's important to remember your seeds are going to be all different sizes in your seed mix. So they go from like pebble to almost microscopic size. So you're going to want to mix that seed mix up with the filler for broadcast seeding, fillers like wood chips, wood shavings, that kind of thing. Again, you want seed to soil contact, so you want that bare soil as much as possible. And the best time to seed is in the morning when the ground is frozen. And then when that ground eventually thaws, your seed is going to sort of be moved down gently into the soil at exactly where it needs to be in order to germinate. If you can seed before a snow, then that snow will cover up that seed and protect it until the snow melts. And that snow melting will actually help that seed move down into the soil just enough. And that's really the best option. But of course, the weather doesn't normally provide us with perfect planting options. So you have to be a little another option for planting, aside from broadcast seeding, is drilling. But most varieties of native seeds should be only lightly covered with soil. So we're talking like drilling down no more than an inch tops. Normally it's like a ½ inch to an inch only. You will need a specialized drill to do that just because it is such a shallow depth. However, any of your NRCS offices, your soil and water conservation district people are going to have a drill that you can rent. And also your local Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever chapters will have equipment to help you with that. The most important thing to remember about native plantings like this is that it can take 3 or more years for them to fully develop. So during the first year, your native wildflowers are going to be spending most of their energy in root development. I'm sure some of you have seen those pictures of the guy standing next to like the native grass, and the root system is like several times taller than he is. That takes time in order to establish. And so that's what normally these wildflower species are doing in the early stages of their development, is they're just spending all of their energy on putting that root system down. So if you don't see some species during the first couple years, or you see a lot of other stuff that you didn't plant, that's entirely normal. Some species even lie dormant for a year before they germinate. If you're really worried, you're looking at your field and you're saying, oh, this looks really crummy, and I'm concerned that there's something wrong with it. There's this great video that Dallas Glazik, one of our other Farm Bill biologists, and Katie put together, talking about this and talking about how it's really just best to leave it alone at that stage. And Katie, I think, is going to put that in the link, in a link to that on this. Yep, so that you can watch that video. Prescribed burning is really your best management option. It's the one that we Farm Bill biologists recommend for everyone. I do have farmers who are really concerned about burning on their own. They've never done it before, and they're worried, I'm going to set my crop field on fire. I'm going to set my neighbor's barn on fire. And it's really important to remember that in Illinois, especially, you have a lot of options for help. If you're concerned about performing a burn yourself, you can always reach out to your local Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever chapters. They have a lot of volunteers who are skilled in doing prescribed burns. They may be able to get you in contact with other groups of people who do those burns. The dates we normally recommend for burning are March 15th through April 15th, or September 15th through November 15th, just to avoid the nesting season for your grassland birds that are going to be out there in the fields. And really important thing I want to remind you guys about is, please don't mow indiscriminately. It is very damaging for your habitat planting. Mowing has very few management benefits, and really all of it does is just promote the spread of invasive species. I have looked at so many old CRP plantings that were, 10 years old. They were planted 10 years ago, and they were managed every year with just mowing. And at the end of that 10-year period, there was just nothing out there but fescue. It really, especially like at this time of year, if you're mowing during the fall, all you're doing is promoting that fescue growth, because fescue is a cool season grass. It grows during the fall season. So your native plants have stopped growing, and they're all out there standing in the field, blocking the sunlight, and then you mow them down and you just basically make it great for the fescue to keep growing. So please don't mow unless you absolutely have to. And this is just my contact information. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I do cover these 7 counties, but I also travel to any surrounding counties that don't have a Farm Bill biologist. If you're not sure if you have a Farm Bill biologist in your area, you can always reach out to me and I'll let you know. Were there any questions?
All right, so thank you, Ashley. So did have a few questions for you. So you mentioned, if possible, plant on a flat surface. But if somebody has a slope or a hillside that they're looking at, including it in the native pollinator plot, is there any special steps that they need to do differently on a slope than what they would do on a flat site?
Well, mostly, like I said, you're going to have to watch out for erosion. So one method that you could use would just be cover cropping to help with that. So you could plant a cover crop for like now, the fall season when it would be bare, and to protect that soil from erosion. A lot of people use oats, especially for the early establishment. I've seen that, where they use cover crop, oats as a cover crop, and usually that does great.
All right, that's good to know, because I'm doing a hillside planting right now. So one of the questions you talked a little bit about, but can you go in a little more depth of why, you talk about the weed banks, but is there any other reason that you should not use a plow when working the soil? Why you shouldn't go deep?
Yeah, well, just like drilling native seed too deeply means it won't germinate, because it's just going to sit under the ground and wait for, it's exposed until it's exposed to sunlight pretty much. There's basically hundreds of years worth of weed seed under that soil. And so even if you want to destroy like these rhizome spreading weeds, it's better to spray and exhaust them at the surface than disturb that seed and cause new growth to emerge.
I definitely also relate good to that one because before I worked with Pheasants Forever, we did a pollinator plot and we plowed it, and it's our worst looking pollinator plot. So the other question I have is, a lot of people, we get this question a lot from people, especially if it's their first pollinator planting, is where can they buy herbicide or seeds or plugs? So where would you recommend people looking to get the herbicide?
For the herbicide, glyphosate is pretty much available anywhere at any like lawn, garden, or farm stores. You can find it. For seed, your NRCS county office is going to have a list of seed vendors that you can use. You can also just look online. I always tell people to shop around, compare prices. You're going to want to select a seed mix based on your budget, what kind of soil you have, and how much diversity you want. Basically, the more diverse, the better, but at the same time, that's also going to be more expensive. So most people want to find a balance between their budget and how many species they want to have.
And that is a good point to bring up, as diverse as possible. The USDA's recommendation for pollinator seed mix is 3 early bloomers, 3 summer bloomers, and 3 fall bloomers. We like it to be a lot more than that. The more diversity, because sometimes Mother Nature doesn't work out, and one of those 9 species might not be blooming in a specific year if it's a drought at a certain time. So the last one would be is, do you have recommendations for people, sites to look at for buying plugs and live plants? I can help you on that one. I get this question a lot.
Yeah, I know Prairie Moon Nursery sells plugs and live plants because I get their catalog.
Prairie Moon Nursery, a lot of local greenhouses in the spring are starting to jump on this native movement. So if you go to your local nurseries, definitely make sure they're native. There are a lot of cultivated species, especially with coneflowers, that are not native. But there are a lot more of local nurseries that are doing it. There's also a company out of Wisconsin called Agricole that I know I've bought some plugs from before. The Mason County Nursery, or Mason Nursery, which is the state nursery, also does do a lot of spring sales of plugs too. Your Natural Area Guardians, the NAGs, Master Gardener, Master Naturalist. There's a lot of organizations that in the spring they do native plant sales. So those are some groups I would check out too. I am going to go ahead, Ashley. That's all the questions I got. So I'm going to go ahead and take back the screen control from you to show a few different options for that. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and leave that. So I am going to let people know, along with Ashley mentioned, for seeds going to your NRCS, Pheasants Forever does have its own seed program. It's called pfhabitatstore.com. If you go there, we do have mixes designed by state for sale there. If you are interested in having a farm bill biologist come out to help with some of your projects, if you go to www.ihuntil, so ihuntilinois.com, you will see the contact information under Team Illinois for all of our biologists. If there is not a biologist in your county, please reach out to the closest one. They'll be able to still help provide technical assistance over the phone. Along with that, if you also go to our website, iHuntIL, we did upload under the Habitat tab. There is some PDFs and some links to different site prep articles that are helpful to refer to when you are doing your habitat projects. So thank you everybody for joining us again. Our next Habitat Lunch Break series is going to be October 20th at noon again. We are going to be talking about woody invasive species and how to identify them, and then how to help remove them off of your property, right? Because this is the best time of year to start working on those as everything's going down to its roots. So we hope to see you next week. And thank you again. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot it our way and we'll try to answer those as best as possible. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the week.